Whitechapel, London, 1888. There are places where stories gather, where the streets remember more than they should. If you stand quietly enough, it almost feels as though the past is still waiting in the fog. Whitechapel is one of those places. At least 5 women were murdered there and became known in the autumn of 1888 as the Ripper's victims. Their killers seemed to slip through the darkness, leaving behind no name, no face, no confession. The streets kept their secret, and by morning, rumor had already begun to weave itself around the truth. And that's the strange thing about mysteries. They never stay exactly as they happen. Every witness remembers something different. Every storyteller fills another empty space. With each generation, another mask is placed upon the unknown, until no one can say where history ends and myth begins. But maybe that's why Jack the Ripper has never been caught, because there were always 2 Jacks. One was a man who walked the streets of Whitechapel. The other walked the streets of our imaginations. One disappeared into history. The other has haunted our collective imagination ever since. Tonight, we hunt them both. Welcome back to The Arkan's Hearth. This is Jack the Ripper Part 4, The 2 Jacks. My name is Michael Jason Chandler, and tonight we will conclude our 4-part journey into one of history's most enduring mysteries. With me, as always, is my dark secret family.
Thorin Wolf, owner and proprietor of Arkan's Juice Tavern and Arkan's Hearth Gaming. And to my left...
Hey guys, my name is the Pixie, and I have a horrible confession. Up until this year, I thought Jack the Ripper was the villain from Death Note.
Oh, wow.
I wish I was kidding. And to my left...
The Ginger, this week at work, I faced my fear of ladders and climbed onto the roof of the building. It was spooky.
First thing I asked was there a body up there?
No, but the ladder was covered in grease and I thought I was going to fall off every step I took.
Well, I want to say, don't feel bad about that whole that whole Death Note thing. When we get through this episode, you're going to find that is perfectly fitting for your generation, and that's not a criticism to your generation at all. I think that when I'm talking about 2 Jacks, that's what we're actually going to discuss. Is there's the one in myth and there's the one in reality, and the one in myth has gone everywhere.
I thought he was going to say there's one in Death Note and there's one in this story, and
What
I was
is
about
the
to be real
guy
scared.
from Death Note named? I always forget.
Hold on.
I was a very sheltered Mormon child.
Right.
I didn't hear about stuff like this.
Well, and I'm not, and like I said, I'm not criticizing it. This is not taught in history class. Mm-hmm. Everybody seems to find the Jack the Ripper story, but it's not like we present that one dude who killed a bunch of girls and then got away with it, and now we make movies about it. I think people watch movies, they read books, they see a documentary, and that's when it becomes real for them. And I think that's everybody, and you're not that old. Discovering Jack the Ripper in your early 20s is probably good. I'm glad you didn't discover it when you were the age I was. Because I actually will tell you later in this episode how old I was when I discovered Jack the Ripper. That's in the script.
I'm going to get this last name wrong, but his name was Light.
Yeah.
Yagami?
Yeah.
Yagami?
Something like that.
Yeah.
At least he was
It's
a
been a minute.
serial killer, so I was right about one thing.
Wasn't he the one that writes all the people's names in the book and they all die?
No, he's the guy that kills the people that's names get written in the book.
Spoilers! Oh, you're talking about the Shingami. The Shigami?
Yeah.
I don't...
Yeah,
what
that's
is
not Jack the Ripper. It's just
was the name
I
of
don't know,
it?
I've never watched
It's
it.
a
I just...
nightmare.
Friends in high school really liked it.
Something.
Jason, did you just translate from the actual name what it was? Is that how you know what that is, or did you watch Death Note?
I have watched both the Death Note anime and the live action one they did on Netflix.
Was it
Oh,
horrible?
yeah.
Actually, I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
Okay.
wow, okay.
It's different, and I don't usually like live action adaptations of anime, but that one's pretty good. So was One Note, actually.
His name was
Or
Ryu.
One Piece. Sorry.
Ryu.
Oh, Ryuk.
Ryu, yeah. I also like One Piece. I thought that was pretty good live action.
I've never seen
Oh my
this.
gosh. For reals? Wait, are we talking about the live action ones?
Yeah, the live action one on Netflix. I thought it was pretty good.
The Avatar one they're doing right now really sucks, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not good.
I don't know. It's hard. Avatar is so beloved, and I watched it in the animation, then I watched it with my wife, and then I watched it with my daughter, and it has such a place in my heart. The live action would have to be so amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the imagery is really neat, but I'm not feeling it.
Can I be excited for a second, though?
Yes.
Okay, so Paramount I don't know if it's actually released or not, but they just did the movie that's the in-between years that's based off of the comic series that never got a show before, and I'm
You mean for
anxiously
Avatar?
excited. Yes,
Oh,
Avatar
cool.
Aang.
Oh, nice.
When he's
Like-
older and
Oh,
When he's
yeah, I
actually-
just got that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just got it's either
It's actually
just got
released.
released or it's about to be released.
I hadn't heard. I haven't
I think
seen
it's
it.
about to. I don't think it's come out quite yet.
Yeah, I think it would have popped up on my feed because I do have Paramount.
I'm so fucking excited. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Welcome to the Arkansas Hearth. Please go and listen to all of our episodes. Specifically, over the last 3 episodes, we've been trying to do something more challenging than identify a killer. We've been trying to separate fact from legend. So, if you are just joining us, hey, there's 3 more of these. Maybe go back and listen to those.
Yay!
And then join us again.
Be
For those
kind,
of-
rewind. Sorry.
Kind rewind. For everybody else, welcome back. And we will continue to separate fact from legend, or at least attempt to, because each generation rewrites Jack the Ripper in some way, adding new theories, fears, to a case that's never truly offered any form of certainty. We traveled back to Whitechapel, and we looked at it as it's remembered from the autumn of 1888. Not the fog-shrouded nightmare of films and novels, but as a real neighborhood of overcrowded lodging houses, immigrant families, dock workers, factory laborers, street vendors, thousands scraping by, fighting hunger and homelessness. It was a community defined by poverty, hardship, disease, and relentless struggle. There we followed the murders. As the Metropolitan Police and the London Police, one woman found dead, then another, and another still. We talked about Victorian detectives' encounters with different offender types that they scarcely understood. No fingerprints, no DNA, no blood typing, no criminal psychology, no modern forensic science, and little concept of victimology. They only had witness statements, bodies, contradictory witnesses, crime scenes that yielded few answers, and a city growing more frightened and demanding with each day. Somewhere within that fear walked a real man who blended so completely into Whitechapel that he simply disappeared into history. Then we turned away from the murderer towards the women whose lives have often been overshadowed by the name. But Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly were more than just victims. As we said, they were mothers, daughters, workers, friends. They were struggling against poverty, alcoholism, and the harsh realities of Victorian London. We talked about how modern victimology asks not just who did it, but why these women were vulnerable, shifting our understanding about the victims and the offender. Then finally, we examined the suspects. And we talked about all the different silly and some of the serious suspects proposed over the last 138 years. We got nowhere near all of them because there's over 100. So we did some of the most known.
That was fun.
Yeah. Some of them were based on evidence, other rumor, memoir, conspiracy. Nearly every generation has believed that it's found some solution, some truth, only for new contradictions to emerge. The deeper one explores the evidence, the more elusive it seems to become. I wanted to offer you a story, challenge the story's closely held view of the victims, and confront the madness of looking at even the best suspects in this case. And after 3 episodes, we arrive at an unsettling realization. We have examined the crimes, the victims, the investigation, the suspects, yet the mystery, for us and for everybody else who's ever tried this, it remains stubbornly intact. So perhaps we've been pursuing the wrong question. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not who Jack the Ripper was, but what Jack the Ripper has become. Because somewhere between the autumn of 1888 and today, something extraordinary happened. The man disappeared, but the story became larger than he ever was or should have been.
That's one of the craziest things to me about Jack the Ripper. Like, there's not that much set-in-stone evidence, but he's just gone through history as
Right.
this shadow that everyone wants to figure out who he is.
Even though, but what's the real likelihood? If we really look at it, I mean, we've done that. We've sat in this room and we have looked at so much. I've given you guys a crash course.
We sat at home while we did this podcast,
Too.
and just up at night, like, okay, hold on. So if this is this and that is that, blah blah blah.
Sorry.
No, please.
In this series, I literally had a dream about Jack the Ripper.
Oh, God.
He got you and me.
What the fuck?
Both of us.
Hey, it's always nice the Ginger will always take Pixie with them. And that's important.
Yeah, we died together because we're best friends.
We'll call it the friendly double event.
Oh, God.
Oh,
I hate to say that I did this to my co-hosts, and I hope I did it to you as well, dear listener. I wanted to give you the madness. Because people who get into this case get crazy. As much as I love the work of Patricia Cornwell and her hunt of the Walter Sickert theory, as much as I'm intrigued by people trying to find DNA that would prove Aaron Kosminski is the killer, it's also kind of wacky. The fact that they would present this DNA that doesn't prove anything except for they found some DNA that kind of matches on a shawl that may have been there.
but that shawl has been has changed hands so many times in
No
the last
chain of custody.
100 years.
Right.
Yeah.
130 years of changing with no chain of custody.
And then the stamp.
Oh, the stamps that were for Walter Sickert and all of that. And that stuff is amazing. I read that stuff and I'm like, I'm glued. I'm glued to the audiobook. I'm glued to the book. I'm glued to the documentary. I love this stuff. And what's hilarious about that is, by the end of it, I'll go, that's it. That makes so much sense. And then I stop and I think about it for 20 minutes and I go, nah, it falls apart. That's not going to work. Yeah. That's really neat. I remember after looking at the painting, Walter Sickert's paintings.
Yes.
And reading Case Closed, the Patricia Cornwell, Jack the Ripper Case Closed, I think is what it was called. I was convinced. I'm like, wow, I think Walter Sickert was the killer, man. And then I read it again and went, oh, wow, I think Walter Sickert had like a crush on Jack the Ripper. I was obsessed with him. But I couldn't get around.
First fanboy.
Well, and I couldn't get around that he just wasn't there for some of the killings. There have been arguments made that he could have, like, rushed back. Europe's not that big. But it was Victorian London. It is an island. He couldn't have just rushed back when he was in, like, France.
It would have taken time.
It takes a little bit of time. And he was a celebrity.
People would have seen him.
Right.
Even back then.
And that's the thing, is that maybe the people in Whitechapel wouldn't have necessarily seen him, but if he was rushing back to kill some girls, people would have remembered, oh, hey, yeah, Walter Sickert just got back last night. He came off a boat and he was running. He was on his way for something.
What do you mean somebody got murdered last night?
That's like saying that if Leonardo DiCaprio was running to the same city every time a murder happened, no one would notice. So, tonight, I want to introduce two different figures, both known by the same name, Jack the Ripper. The first Jack is almost certainly an ordinary human being. He lives somewhere in London. He worked somewhere. He walked real streets. He passed policemen without attracting attention. He bought meals. He slept under a roof. Maybe not all the time. Maybe he had neighbors, friends, maybe even a family. Whatever his occupation, appearance, motivation, he was just a dude. A mortal man, like every other human being. He grew older, he fell ill, and he died. His body disappeared into history, taking his true identity away with it. Then there's the second Jack the Ripper. He never died because he was never really a man. He was something else. A fever dream seeded by the media, a symbol, an idea, a shadow. Every era has recreated him. Victorians imagined a real monster, a gentleman, a foreign madman, lurking in the darkness. Edwardian writers suspected aristocrats and secret societies. 20th century films transformed him into a caped monster, stalking gaslit streets with a surgeon's precision. Novelists made him into an occult figure. Comic books turned him into an immortal villain. Modern films have imagined him as everything from a supernatural force to the devil himself. Each generation creates the Jack it wants, or maybe needs. And in doing so, we reveal as much about ourselves and our own anxieties as we ever do about a historical crime. That transformation is remarkable. Many serial killers committed much more horrific crimes, many more crimes, but few became myths. Jack the Ripper did. Not because we know so much, not because we know a little. When history leaves the empty spaces, myth rushes in to fill them. And I think that Victorian England, what it was, also helped that myth. That's why we love steampunk. We love that era. It's full of myth.
I was gonna say too that, it's so like human nature to fill in the gaps when you don't know things. You know what I mean? Like the human mind is amazing, but it's also terrifying, and I think a lot of people just came up with things and it all got misconstrued, and if there ever was facts, we don't have them anymore because they got mixed in with everything else.
Right. So much of what we think we know, I actually wonder, I'm going to have to go back and look at the first episode because I presented the first episode as the case the way it was. Mm-hmm. But was I right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of that was me?
Yeah.
And my perception of it. That was how I remember the case. But was it really how it was remembered? I wonder. I'm going to check my accuracy on that. Maybe that'll make its way to the graveyard one of these days. We've got a episode we're going to do at the end of each season. We're going to call the Mistakes Graveyard.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's going to be us talking about where mostly I messed up and corrections that we're doing. We just did the first episode. That'll be our 30th episode for this season, and it'll end our season 1.
I didn't know we were going to announce that.
We can.
Okay.
It's not a secret.
Okay.
Is the plane station in the graveyard? I love
it is
the
not.
plane station.
The plane station, so the graveyard is, I'll probably cut this out, but the graveyard is about actual factual errors that are made in scripts. They're not about making fun of us. We will do that to each other.
Okay, so then it's a fact that they're called plane stations.
Ooh, should we also do 30? Okay, Jason, hear me out. 31 episodes. And there's an episode where we just start riffing on each other.
So it's all of the silly ass shit we said.
Yeah.
Season 1.
It's all of us ripping on you.
Terms that we flubbed up while we talk. Like
absolutely.
You know what? I don't.
Or the fact that I can't read.
I don't think I get enough to fit it on a flatbread. So moving on.
Damn
it. So Whitechapel became a place with a collective imagination. And I actually want to say something on this. I remember Whitechapel, I'd looked at maps of it. I've seen all the documentaries. It was such a stage in my mind. I had, like, when I was young, I had almost memorized pictures. I had these ideas, all of these things. And a number of years ago, it was before my daughter was born, so it's been like 20 years. I watched a documentary where they walked the streets of Whitechapel at the time. And this was like 2005, 2006. And I remember being like, whoa, it's like just a neighborhood. Of course, it had to modernize, everything modernized, but it's just seeing the real Whitechapel. I was like, oh, right. It's not something that exists in my brain. That's a real place. And it's totally not what it was, and the maps don't work anymore. But I remember just having that moment, and I had no problem with it. I like having fact over fiction. But when that came into my head as fact, I was like taken aback a little bit. So Whitechapel did become a place within the collective imagination. The unseen murderer's identity vanished almost as completely as if he'd stepped into another world. Since then, historians, detectives, novelists, filmmakers, journalists, podcasters have entered that shared darkness, each emerging with a different version of Jack. Perhaps that's why this mystery has endured while so many others have faded. Solving a murder closes a story, but an unsolved one grows. Jack the Ripper became an archetype, the unseen predator lurking with certainty, and it ends where the myth begins. Over the years, countless monsters have taken up his gauntlet, destroying what it meant to feel safe. Tonight, in our final journey into Whitechapel, we're hunting both of them. As I said before, we want to know about the man who escaped in 1888, but also the shadow that haunts our imagination. The second Jack was born as the first one was still walking the streets of Whitechapel. As police searched for evidence, newspapers raced to fill headlines, often favoring one story over another, and often favoring a story over certainty. Facts emerged slowly. Memories shifted, but the press needed answers. And when certainty is lacking, stories filled the gaps. Legends are born not from lies, but from silence waiting to be filled. The murders coincided with a changing in the journalism landscape. Cheap newspapers spread quickly. Competition chased sensation, and fear became profitable. Jack the Ripper became a public performance. Every reader became a detective, every conversation another solution to a crime no one really even understood. Nowhere was this more obvious than in the case of the infamous Dear Boss letter. In late September 1888, a letter arrived at the Central News Agency, written in red ink and signed for the first time, yours truly, Jack the Ripper. The letter taunted the police, and here's what it said. Dear Boss, I keep hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I've laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I'm down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. My knife's so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. The press printed this letter almost in full, and the name caught fire. Now, can you imagine that? We don't have any verification that this is real. There's no proof this was written by a real person. Jack the Ripper was probably the creation of a British painter or a journalist, a medical student. When you start and you consider these are being written as the murders are happening, and you consider that printed this in the paper, how can you think anything but that there are two Jacks? There's one on the street whose name is, I don't know, what was common back then? George?
Jeffrey?
Robert?
Gregory?
This was an invention. This was fake news at its beginning.
No way, 1800s fake news.
It is.
I didn't even think about that.
But it is. It's fake. It's drama. It's dinner theater, and it always was.
It could be fake.
It probably was.
I know, but there's a slim chance that, this guy was that cocky. You know what I mean?
Yes. Keep talking. Come into the madness with me.
Join
me. Join me.
I have been there for months, Jason.
No, you're not wrong. But again, here we go. You're absolutely right. Maybe it's real. And that's all we needed, isn't it?
Yeah.
All we needed. So Jack the Ripper was suddenly on every front page in London. A persona now, more than a real man. Whether the killer wrote it or not, the letter gave the unknown murderer a name, a voice, and a stage identity. Afterward, it hardly mattered who he really was. The character had already entered the imagination. And as the investigation continued, the killer's identity became a canvas for imagination. As we said before, people saw surgeon, sailor, gentleman, foreigner. Each theory offered comfort. Oh, if it's a gentleman, it's all of those rich people. They have everything, and now they're killing us. Those people are monsters. Oh, it's a poor sailor. It's a trashy person. It's not the people in our streets. We're safe. It didn't have to be real. It's what people needed. And this is during the murders. Police gathering statements, newspapers gathering possibilities, and the public blurring history with myth. This reveals something fundamental. We are uncomfortable with unanswered questions. We construct narratives in order to feel better, to feel comfortable. Every generation rewrites the Whitechapel murders according to its own needs. So every theory tells us not about the killer, it tells us about ourselves. It's the theater of imagination. Whitechapel is a place where reality and myth exchange places. Boundaries blur, strangers become suspects, and every rumor offers a new version of the quote-unquote truth. In these winding streets, identities grow unstable, and masks are worn so long that even those who wear them start to forget what's beneath. History stands in the street, while imagination quietly builds the theater around it. And in that theater, the unknown killer became a role, projected into each generation, the evidence and unanswered questions remaining, but the face under the spotlight, shifting with the fears of the time. So, why was Jack the Ripper a surgeon? A healer who became a destroyer? A symbol of intelligence turned into darkness? Why was he a gentleman killer, hiding behind privilege? Or a madman lurking in the crowds? A product of growing fears and unseen threats in the modern cities of the day. Over time, he's morphed from a criminal into a legend, a figure of folklore, a shadow in the fog. Evil itself, the name used as a symbol, no longer bound to any person or any era, but to fear itself, and how evil can pass along unnoticed. Popular culture amplifies him. He's become an archetype, the well-dressed Victorian killer. I watched From Hell with my daughter, and she said, Daddy, he didn't really wear that hat, did he? It was the top hat. She's like, come on.
Oh, it's not like your fedora?
No, it's not like my fedora.
Oh, really?
Shut up.
Okay.
No, I just thought it was funny because, it's strange looking, a guy dressed to the nines with a top hat and a cape going into Whitechapel, killing people and no one noticing.
Oh, he would be noticed.
My daughter was like, that's bullshit, right, Daddy? Because my kid's smart.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not wrong. And she loved the movie, but she took one look at it and went, that's really silly. Because it kind of is. In truth, the real killer left only uncertainty. That is imagination's greatest gift. Jack the Ripper endures because each generation creates the Jack it needs. The identity that we give Jack reveals us. For many, the Whitechapel murders remain history's greatest unsolved investigation. We still have historians and detectives and amateur researchers carrying the hope that we're going to find some overlooked document that will reveal the truth. There's a hope rooted in empathy and justice that seeks to restore the names of victims. That's where the historian looked back at their real lives. The 5 women whose stories deserve more than to be a shadow cast by a man who killed them. But the same mystery that inspires hope has also drawn something darker. Some are compelled not by the detective's quest, but by the allure of a monster. They see Jack not as a tragedy, but as a role, a mask to be worn. History has seen people imitate him, claim his name, even trying to continue his story. Once the mask exists, someone will want to wear it. The tragedy is that those women, poverty-stricken and suffering families, reality surrendered ground to performance. And the stage has just grown larger. Jack the Ripper became more famous than the lives that were lost. And that's wrong. Because beneath every theory and novel and documentary and headline, the real Whitechapel waits. And he was just a bad guy. He was just a killer. He wasn't better than any of the people who've been put on death row. He wasn't smarter. He wasn't special. I don't even think he was probably that good of a criminal. He just lived in a time where it was easier to get away with it.
Yeah, if he tried that crap nowadays, he'd get caught.
Myth asks who we wish to become. History asks who actually suffered. When the two blur, myth overtakes memory. And that transformation, in my opinion, began immediately in 1888 and has continued today as we still have so many people searching for the man so lost in history that the truth behind the stories may never come forward, but we keep telling them to ourselves. And if they could put out another really good Jack the Ripper movie tomorrow,
I'll probably watch it.
I'm in line. Eventually, every investigation reaches its limit. The crime scenes are examined, statements collected, theories weighed. Beyond that, history grows quiet. The dead cannot speak. Lost evidence remains lost. Somewhere past the final act, we create that imagination, that fiction. It's a force. And for all of mankind, it has shaped our myths and legends. Since the first people gathered around the fire, we are natural storytellers, weaving fragments into patterns, filling silence with words. It's what we're doing right now.
Exactly.
None of us have ever truly met Jack the Ripper. We know only what evidence is left behind, and that's not much. Ginger, you said that earlier. It's just really not that much. Police reports, witness statements, newspaper articles, theories. From the edges, we fill the center. That imagined man always looks different without realizing it. We've placed a mask on the unknown, only shaped by our own worldview. Whitechapel's legacy is 138 years old. People have entered the same mystery, emerging with a different version each time. So now it's our turn I promised that we would present our theories. So tonight we're going to do the very same. Not because we expect to solve the mystery. I kind of consider that silly. But because every theory tells two stories. That of an unknown man and that of the person searching for it. If we listen closely, perhaps the second story is just as revealing as the first. So, let's see what we can discover from Thorn Wolf.
Honestly, I don't think any of the famous suspects fit. Ostrog, Leather Apron, and even Aaron Kosminski at least check one box for me. They lived and worked in Whitechapel. I think the killer absolutely had to. But after that, I think that they stopped fitting any of the other theories. I don't think Jack was hunting specific women. I think he found someone, watched her for a night or maybe two, figured out her routine, and waited until they were alone. Whitechapel was like a maze. And if you knew those streets, you knew exactly where you had a few minutes before someone wandered around the corner. The double event actually makes me believe that even more. I think the second woman had already been stalked. The first murder that night feels different. Almost like something happened that triggered him. And then he went back to the victim he'd already picked. My guess is he worked around one of the doss houses. Maybe someone who could turn women away, see who had nowhere to sleep, and knew exactly who would be walking the streets alone. People trust kindness more than they trust authority. And I think that if the police would have looked harder at the people helping these women instead of just the obvious suspects, they might have found something. I definitely don't put much faith in the witnesses either. Too much drinking, too much gossip, too many stories changing after the fact. That's one of the reasons I think this case is probably impossible to solve. As for who Jack really was, I don't think he hid in the shadows all day. I think he was out in the open, just another ordinary guy everyone walked past without a second thought. Not someone his victims knew personally, but someone they probably recognized because he belonged there. And maybe that's the scariest part. The monster wasn't hiding. He was just another face in Whitechapel.
I like your theory. I've long thought that if we have a local who knows the streets, knows the mazes, if he works at the doss houses and he picks someone, he'll be seeing them. They're coming and going all the time. You know, you talk about watching these women, but they're going to these doss houses trying to get a room every night.
There's a part that I didn't get to write in.
Okay.
It's about the last murder and why I think he disappeared.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit.
So,
I like this theory.
This is going to sound different because I'm not reading off a piece of paper.
Yeah. No,
so, I think that, Mary Kelly was murdered in a doss house.
Yep.
I think that he shot where he ate. And that was scary as shit. And that is why he disappeared after that one. Especially since maybe he got his fixation, because it still goes with maybe the curiosity of anatomy, or maybe he finally got all of his anger out. And I am going to primarily say I know I went on this whole woman Jack thing in episode 3 or 2, or I can't remember.
No, it doesn't matter.
But the last murder was so everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean on the walls.
Yeah. Well, he took his time. We talked about it.
Yeah, he took absolutely everything he needed to learn. He learned. And then when they investigated the murder, maybe something clicked and said, oh shit, I don't want to get caught. I'm going to have to stop.
So I've compared this killer to Gary Ridgway, the Green River killer.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that he was intelligent. I don't see anything that proves any real intelligence.
No.
But I will say, so Gary Ridgway, through the investigation for the Green River killer, his co-workers started calling him Green River Gary because they were questioning him, because the people he worked with knew that he liked prostitutes and that he'd been questioned by the police in connection with the murders. So they made fun of him for it, and it bothered him. So I actually think if you think about that, and if you think about, how people react, how people are. So if he works at the doss house, if a girl that he had been stalking, a young one, pretty one, goes to the doss house, gets a room, he sneaks in, he does these horrible things to her. The people at that doss house had to have been freaked. I mean, think about...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, somebody got murdered where you work. In that room over there.
Oh, God.
They would have been talking about it. They would have had theories, because we're talking about human beings.
I'm nodding my head, yes. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Same. We all are.
So you worked there, you killed her, And now everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about who they think might have done it. And somebody, all I think it would take is one person going, would have had to be somebody who had a key. Would have been I wonder if it's someone who knows the rooms. Maybe someone who knew that window was broken and they could have reached in and unlocked the door.
So good theory, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, I think it's a great theory because, and unfortunately, they didn't investigate the DOS House employees.
They weren't important enough.
Or they just were, my theory is...
In their eye.
Well, my theory is in the minds of police, it's like, well, if one of them's acting weird, they're here all the time, somebody would have said something.
Jason, it's always the butler.
Well, it's always the nice person who no one could see doing it. If you look at killers, how often do people interview the neighbors, the families, and they go, oh, no, not little Jimmy. Little Jimmy wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, little Jimmy killed 15 women.
Oh, God, who's little Jimmy?
Well, I'm just making something up. But we've got little Gary or Ted or...
It's always the pillars of the community.
It's always somebody that nobody expects. But I think all it would have taken was for one person to say, I'll bet it's somebody who had a key. And if you're a guy with a key who killed Mary Kelly in that room, I agree with you. You might run. You might stop killing in that area. One thing I thought about doing in this, and there's just so much of it, I didn't feel like adding a whole other element, was looking at killings throughout Europe and other places and trying to see if anybody else did these sorts of murders anywhere in the world after
that
this
would
was
be
done.
the biggest rabbit trail.
That's why I didn't do it.
Or bird walking.
Bird walking, as our friend Tassit says. No, I agree with you. But yeah, no. I think it's a great theory.
Okay.
But it's not the only one.
Nope.
Because now...
Pixie!
Yay! Alrighty. So for me personally, the more I think about Jack the Ripper, the less convinced I am that we're actually dealing with one person. I think the Canonical Five were victims of opportunity, more than they were, planned out. I think they were chosen because they were vulnerable. And I absolutely believe that there was a deep hatred of women behind most of the attacks, if not all of the attacks. The murders themselves feel incredibly organized, especially considering the precision of the injuries and the fact that the killer managed to avoid capture despite the limitations of Victorian policings. Like my homie, Ginger, I don't buy the idea that he had to be a doctor. Somebody with practical experience around knives could have done the same damage. I mean, like we have talked about, a basic knowledge of hunting or butchering animals, or hell, even farmers a lot of the time have to know, where to cut a chicken's head off,
Well, I think that the argument is whether or not he knew human anatomy enough to cut out a woman's uterus, but I make an argument that, there might be murders we don't know about where he learned where some of that stuff is by...
I almost said something, and maybe I shouldn't say that.
No, go ahead.
I mean, that's something I know about because I work at an animal shelter, Yeah,
no, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Were there any veterinarians, Whitechapel?
They did look at veterinarians. They did.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. Like I said, I never felt that the police did a terrible job in this case. They actually investigated a lot of people.
Right. Anyway, go on. Go on. Anyway, go on, Pixie.
Yeah, you didn't buy that it was a doctor. Sorry.
Yep. I also think he probably worked in Whitechapel, but I don't necessarily think he lived there. Because we kind of talked about how, you would think somebody would get recognized. You know what I mean? So, I think that's part of the reason that if he didn't live there, but he worked there and had extensive knowledge of the city, then, there's a higher chance that he could have been I'll go at night when everybody's sleeping, and then I'll go be, spooky around the city, and then...
Kind of the opposite of Thorne saying that he lived there, worked there, as you suggested. You're suggesting almost the opposite, but not. That he didn't live there, that was his hunting ground, which is a possibility. That it was his hunting ground.
Yeah. Yeah, if he'd been local, I feel like somebody would eventually have, noticed that he was acting weird, you know what I mean? Because, a lot of the times that is how killers are caught nowadays is, people notice patterns. So, if he wasn't there often enough for people to be noticing these patterns, you think about the time period, and, this is the kind of time period where you think about everybody knows everybody, right? Because, I mean, nowadays I guess it's somewhat like that in quotation marks because we have social media. But people are putting up a front on social media. And I mean, like, maybe people were too in these social settings. Probably were. But, I don't know, it just seems so much more personal. I feel like it'd be easier to notice.
Actually, I agree with you. And I don't think people would be putting up a lot of front. They would know the people who live close to them, work close to them pretty well because they're so poor and they are so starving and they are so fighting homelessness. I don't know that they've got time to put up fronts, you know?
Yeah.
They're starving.
I think it would have been a little bit more personal, and I think if somebody were to start acting differently or, you know, patterns were starting to happen, I think that would have been seen really quickly. Also, most eyewitness accounts are hard for me to put a whole lot of faith in. I'm definitely fascinated by the diary. That's something that I keep going back to. I don't know. I feel like if something is this talked about and this, like, important, people are gonna start making up stories about it because everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame. You know what I mean? Everybody wants that. But the diary, if I go back to that, I do, even if I don't believe that it's genuine, that's the same kind of thing I'm talking about, the 15 minutes of fame, because somebody went through all the trouble of, like, using the correct paper for the time period, the correct ink for the time period, the correct, like... Calligraphy. Like,
yeah.
That's a lot of effort. That is so much effort. And I think that's the thing that, like, really keeps drawing me back to the diary, is whoever did that must have also been a sociopath, because how are you willing to do that much?
Well, you have to have a very specific skill set.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Succeed,
like, that is crazy. That's the only reason I keep going back to the diary, even though I don't necessarily think it was real.
But if it's either real or the person who did it was an obsessive, crazy person.
That's what I'm saying, and I think that's almost more interesting to me. Is if the person, there's just a person out there that's like, I don't know.
I really want my great-grandfather to be the killer.
Yeah. It's freaking crazy. Basically, my main theory is this. I don't think it was one person. For the same reason as my 15 minutes of fame thing that I said earlier. Because if you think again back to this time period, they can't really pinpoint one person the same way that we can now. So it'd be much easier to pull off copycat killings. And everybody's like, oh, there's this serial killer around. It's the serial killer striking again, not, other people taking the opportunity to do something horrible just because they can. Like, it's like, oh, there's already a person to blame this on. Why not?
Do you think, maybe you think that a single killer killed the first two?
Yes.
And then stopped. And somebody else came in and because I've read numerous times that the investigators at the time felt that there were a number of things that were consistent, the way the throats were cut, the bodies, the mutilization of the body and such. But I also make the argument, and I don't want to disparage, but I don't think that information and chain of custody were as well kept in Victorian England as they are now. And so I could see, someone being able to pay off a cop to give them details to get the killings right. The problem I have with that is that leaves a person who knew who the killer was, or one of the killers were, and didn't just left it that way. And I don't know.
I don't know. That's just like my personal theory, because I don't know, you talk about the purge, you know what I mean? Just saying, if you had the opportunity and nobody could do anything about it.
So, okay, maybe I have more faith in humanity. I think that if you had a purge and everybody could get away with it, I think you get a lot of people trying to steal computers and break windows and get back at their neighbor. I don't think you'd have the murders that the movies suggest. But that's,
we would. We'd have way more than we have now.
Well, I'm not saying people wouldn't kill. I don't know. I think that a lot of people think if they could get away with it, they might deal with that person they don't like.
I have a list.
But I don't think it's real. I think that in the end, they would think about it, but if somebody said, okay, free reign, go kill that person, their soul would kick in. Their morality would kick in. And they would say, oh, I would love to kill that person, but I was never serious. Really? I want that person out of my life. I want them to leave me alone. I don't want them to come back. And I really want them to get punished for the shit they did. Because usually there's a reason why we dislike that person so much. But to truly and genuinely want to hurt someone, man, they'd have to be trying to hurt my kid.
Yeah.
I mean, it would take a lot to get me there. Not saying I can't get there. Everybody can get there. But I don't think everybody is as close to that. I think that it's so easy to think, man, if I could, I would. I think that's real easy to think and feel. But I think if you were genuinely faced with it, I think that human decency would win out.
I don't know. I guess that kind of goes back to, too, that, like, not to, like, pull the gender card, but, like,
No, yeah.
I'm just saying, like, from a...
You prefer the bear?
From a feminine perspective. Exactly. But from a feminine perspective, you know, I have seen in my own personal life enough horrible men that I have absolutely no doubt that if a bunch of men had the opportunity to kill to get sexual gratification, that they would. I have absolutely no doubt.
Almost made a joke, but then but then they got real
Can I
deep
say-
into it, so I decided not to.
I would love to know the joke.
I said I was sorry.
Good
Oh
Lord,
my
Lord.
God.
But that was before they said the whole sexual predator thing. I was like, no, wait!
So
I
never
should cut
mind,
that
never
in
mind.
earlier. No, I'm going to say I don't argue with you. I don't argue against what you're saying. God, I hope you're wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
for
No,
all
I get
of
that.
for mankind
I think everyone
and
hopes they're wrong.
Yeah.
for mankind and my daughter's sake, I
Yeah.
hope that you have been faced by such horrible people that is an unfortunate, horrible, unlucky thing in your world that I hope is over. And you're now going to be surrounded by people who wouldn't hurt you. And that the majority of people aren't out there trying to hurt people or wanting to. That's what I hope. If you feel like naive, comment. Say, Jason, you're naive.
Jason,
I'm cool
you're
with
naive.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Maybe a little bit.
But I hope. Even looking at all of this, even reading all the horrors that people can do, I believe that there is basic decency.
And I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just
You just think it's
from what I've
more
seen.
rare
You know,
than-
yeah, exactly.
than I
Like
do.
I came from a place where I grew up very optimistic and very everybody's a good person, and that
Oh, yeah.
put me in a world of fucking hurt to a degree that I cannot even begin to start describing, and I don't even think I can mentally process most of it, and I still haven't. So,
You know, it's funny.
You know?
I teach my daughter that I think that human decency is real and I think there are good people out there. But I also teach my daughter trust no one.
see, that's not how I was
Trust
taught.
is earned.
Yeah.
Trust is special. Trust is a gift. People have to earn that gift. People should earn your trust and people should want to fight for you to trust them.
Mhm.
But hey, there's real good people out
Yeah.
there if you look. That's how I raise my kid. Because I want her to believe and I want her to find love and light and greatness in this world, but I don't want her to be victimized.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
you know,
No, I got you. And that's,
no, that's horrible.
and the thing about being victimized that you're saying too is crazy because, you know, I was raised with the turn the other cheek.
Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that if everybody's doing it.
If everybody's doing it, yeah. But when you're taught that and then nobody else is doing it, then it's not great because
Right.
only got two cheeks. Wait.
You can
So,
make an argument.
the moral of the story is Pixie is angry, and they deserve to be.
No, and everybody, you know, there's a lot of horror in this world.
Mhm.
I read about it almost every day. It's one of my favorite pastimes because there's something wrong with me.
I go to sleep listening to true crime documentaries. That's probably not a great thing, but you know what? I
But
do
it is what it
anyways.
is. Is there a lot of horror in this world? Absolutely. But I hope as we have this mental health craze where people are getting therapy, some for the first time in the world, and we're pushing for men to get therapy, and we're trying to change that's no longer the taboo that it once was. I hope that as a society and as a world, we are working towards a better version of ourselves. But I do watch the news,
Yeah,
and that's all I'll say.
that's enough to say. Genuinely.
Okay. Was there any more you'd like to say?
No, I kind of think I've covered all my bases.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So after spending so much time with the evidence, I keep coming back to the victims. The victims tell us more about Jack than any of the suspects do. I don't think he was hunting specific women as much as he was hunting vulnerability.
So that's what you and Pixie agreed on.
Yeah. Whitechapel gave him access to people who were desperate, overlooked, and easy to isolate. And I think he knew that world well enough to move through it without drawing attention. His crimes feel mostly organized to me, especially in the ways the bodies were mutilated, but there are some moments that seem more impulsive, almost as if his emotions briefly overtook whatever plan he had. I don't believe he needed to be a surgeon, a butcher, a hunter, like we were saying earlier, veterinarians, anyone with basic butchering knowledge.
It's not like it was unknown that surgeons took recently buried bodies, cut them up to find out where things were.
That's true.
This was common knowledge. People made money off of it. It was a business. So,
Did you not know that?
Oh, yeah.
I think I knew it and locked it away in my brain somewhere.
So, listen, science, we learn so much from these cadavers that were, how do I put this gently?
Well, at the time, there was a religious belief that cutting apart a body was sacrilegious. It was disrespectful to the person who'd passed. However, it was also deeply important for us to learn how to heal people.
I say gross, but we still do that today, and I was fascinated with the Body Worlds book when I was a kid.
I would love to go there. We should all go there right now.
Right now?
The bodies exhibit?
Yeah.
You know the one where they...
I work in the morning.
My dad got to go there before he died. He thought it was like the coolest thing
They had it in Albuquerque.
My
when
dad-
I was
Yeah, that's exactly where my dad was.
I was in
Vegas,
Albuquerque doing a training, and I saw that was there, and I went through it.
My favorite one is the chess player, where they cut half of his head off and his brains out.
That one
Yep.
was really, really cool. That one
It was
fascinating.
intense.
So I can't even say ew to people having the job of cutting apart bodies.
Well, I don't know though, because I always say that I would love going to Body Worlds, but then I feel like I would go there and get squeamish.
Yeah, no, same. I'd see intestines.
I would still like to go there, but I would get squeamish.
I'd see intestines and be like, ooh.
Ah,
I don't
I don't know. I
intestines.
thought the body exhibit, it disturbed me, but it intrigued me too.
I think that's
A
the
lot.
whole point of the exhibit.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to Jack the Ripper and what he did to those bodies.
Oh god.
I think the Doctor theory was super hyped up by the people of the Victorian era. I think they thought that was a really cool idea, that there was a scary doctor going around cutting apart people.
And I think that maybe Victorians were scared by doctors.
I can't
I
blame
mean,
them.
I would be too.
Yeah.
I still am.
Doctors do scary stuff. They cut people up.
They used leeches and they did C-sections with chainsaws.
Oh my god, I totally forgot about that. Don't remind me.
So doctors back then were extra scary. You think doctors are scary now?
Oh, and they pulled teeth. No, barbers pulled teeth. Never mind.
And
Oh,
barbers
yeah.
did surgery.
Oh god.
Good lord! Oh yeah, I forgot about that. There was a guy that kind of did that as like a circus act.
Your barber, dentist, surgeon? Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry. He has some opium to help you feel better.
Oh yeah, this is the age of the opioid crisis, huh?
I would say it was the beginning, maybe
Yeah.
not the end.
No, but it's
As
where it
a
all
former
started.
opiate addict.
But this is where it started.
Oh, yeah.
Sherlock Holmes was addicted to opium.
What?
23 years sober, folks.
That is crazy.
Proud of you.
Same, actually, same.
That's almost as long as I've been alive.
I know.
That is as long as I've been. I'm just kidding.
You're older than me.
It's as long as your mom has been alive.
So the doctor theory was, yeah. No, I think the doctor theory came as much out of people's fear of doctors.
Well,
I just wanted to say that.
It reminds me of like the plague doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically a cryptid. Can you call him a
Yay.
cryptid? He's an SCP
No.
at least.
He was,
Yeah, the SCP,
well,
yes.
You do know that plague doctors were real.
Well, yes, but it reminds me of how something that was based in reality has been blown up into this big mythology
absolutely.
thing. Like, the Plague Doctor
Absolutely.
was a real thing, and then turned into this big, magical story. Of,
You know why the mask looked the way it did? The
To
plague
put
doctor.
herbs in the beef.
Yep.
So
that they could handle the smells.
That is horrifying. You know, maybe I should wear one of those to work when I go in the puppy rooms.
It could help.
They're gonna love you with the plague
Puppies
doctor mask.
stink, dude.
If he didn't live in Whitechapel, I'm not saying he had to live in Whitechapel, but I definitely think he worked there just like Pixie said. Because how are you going to know the shortcuts? How are you going to learn that area so well if you're not there pretty often? Because you had to be able to be in a spot to see the vulnerable people without them seeing you.
Right.
You know, you had to have some kind of knowledge of Whitechapel in order to get away with stuff like this. Most of the witness statements are too inconsistent for me to trust them when it comes to any evidence that we potentially had from them. Everyone wanted to be the person who caught Jack the Ripper, you know.
Still that way.
I mean, it's still that way, but
Yup.
like back then, they probably would have said anything to get the police to investigate their lead.
Absolutely. Or to get the newspapers to listen to them, write it down, maybe even pay them something.
Of the historical suspects, Aaron Kosminski comes closest to fitting the profile, but even then, I don't think any of the popular names truly satisfy the evidence. To me, the murder seemed driven by a deep resentment toward women that carried a sexual component and was fueled by opportunity. If Jack wasn't caught or institutionalized, I don't believe he simply stopped. His violence appeared to be escalating, which makes me think he either moved somewhere else or died before continuing. Because the way it went, his last victim was so ripped apart, someone that was going after some victim with such ferocity usually won't just stop.
Escalating, and he could have had a cooling off period. That's why I suggested some other somewhat similar attacks from like a year later and a couple years later. Because usually he might have had a cooling off. That definitely what happened with Mary Kelly could have satiated him for a time, but no, I don't believe that he would have stopped. No.
Well, and back then it would have been so easy to move 3 towns over and change your identity.
Exactly.
If you move far enough away and not everyone heard about Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders, he could find somewhere where nobody had heard about him and start again.
Or just move away for a year,
And
wait
come
till
back.
everything cools down, and come right back.
But when I picture him, I don't see a monster that stood out in the crowd. I see a man people barely noticed at all. A quiet, isolated man carrying unresolved trauma, and someone who blended into everyday life until no one was looking. I don't think he would have been friendly. I think he would have kept himself, probably been awkward. If you're going based off the victimology, a lot of killers that go after women for those reasons or in that way are very awkward and stick to themselves because...
Gary Ridgway killed 60 sex workers or more and was married 3 times and has a son.
That's crazy.
I'm just saying.
I'm not saying all of them are lovers. I'm saying a lot of them are...
But then, Ted Bundy was weird as hell, and he did end up married with a kid, but, there were definitely people he dated that he creeped out. But then there was a major crime writer, Ann Rule, who was like his buddy, and never saw anything weird about him.
That's crazy.
And she was brilliant, wrote an excellent book, The Stranger Beside Me. So who knows? We'll use that. When we cover in our normal episode, we will cover Ted Bundy because he did kill in Utah, therefore he qualifies. So I want to point out that for you, as I said, Thorne focused a lot on geography. Pixie focused a lot on criminology. For you, it was victimology. It's what the victims tell us. So now we'll go to me, and I think I am pure storytelling. But we'll see what you guys think. When I imagine Jack the Ripper, which I have many times, I find myself resisting nearly every popular image culture has given it. I don't picture a brilliant surgeon carrying polished instruments, walking through the London fog. I do not imagine an aristocrat hiding terrible secrets behind wealth or respectability, nor an occult mastermind orchestrating murders, mostly because I don't think groups can keep secrets. I don't think these were elaborate rituals, secret societies. History has filled Whitechapel with extraordinary villains because extraordinary villains make wonderful stories. They allow us to believe that evil announces itself through intelligence, charisma, mystery, and unmistakable darkness. But if monsters appear extraordinary, then perhaps ordinary people can recognize them before it's too late. It's a comforting thought, but unfortunately, history rarely offers us comfort. I find myself imagining someone painfully ordinary. The nice guy next door, the one that no one ever saw hurting a fly. He became invisible long before the murders began. Not because he deliberately concealed himself, but because no one ever really looked at him in the first place. Like I said, people might have liked him, probably felt like he was quiet. They would have said that he was not a monster. He was a poor common man whose face disappeared into every crowd because there was nothing particularly memorable about it. Someone whose clothes were unremarkable, his voice carried no authority, his presence lingered nowhere any person's memory. He worked on the streets, he knew them, he knew that many poor women without support lived there. This is the sort of man that people unconsciously stepped around in the street without ever wondering where he'd come from, where he was going. He did not just belong there. He seemed like he'd always been. He was forgotten, probably, maybe lonely. I do make an argument that he might have been lonely, that anyone who hated women that much. If you think about it, every city, every town has men like this. Most aren't dangerous. Most never become violent. They just simply move through the world being unnoticed. Their existence acknowledged only when absolutely necessary, when they're right there in the room telling you about their day or their job. Or invisibility changes people. When the world refuses to see you, you become remarkably skilled at seeing everyone else. You notice routines because no one even thinks that you're watching. You recognize who walks alone, who lingers in familiar places, whose absence might not be recognized until morning. An invisible life creates an invisible observer, and invisible observers often understand a city in ways that those living comfortably within it never can. We all know the people watchers. We all know the people who walk through the mall and just watch people shop. Doesn't make them monsters, but I bet you they see things that none of us see. Perhaps that's why I keep returning to Whitechapel itself. It was a community overflowing with people whom Victorian society had already decided not to see. The rich people, the successful people, they lived uptown. And all of these people were packed in, and no one wanted to look at them, and nobody wanted to think about them. The poor, the homeless, the immigrants, the laborers, Jewish people, women struggling with addiction, families living one missed paycheck away from disaster. Society ignored them every day. And I think Jack lived among them in more ways than we've ever considered. I think Whitechapel had already erased him socially, emotionally, and spiritually long before he murdered anyone. Not erased from existence, but from significance. Forgotten people sometimes convince themselves that they've become a sort of ghosts while they're still alive. I do not imagine a criminal genius who outwitted Scotland Yard through extraordinary intelligence. I imagine someone who might not have been intelligent at all. He was someone who was never identified precisely because there was nothing extraordinary about it. The police searched for remarkable men, professionals, monsters, even people who say, well, they looked at butchers, they looked at sailors. Those aren't extraordinary men, but they're employed. They have skills that are clear. They have friends on the ship or people who buy at their shops who might recognize them. I think this was a rag and bone man. This was a lamplighter. He was nobody. And you saw him so often, all day, every day. You just stopped looking. He wasn't a doctor or a prince. We all love intriguing monsters, secret societies, but every eyewitness actually described him perfectly. Average height, average build, ordinary clothing, an ordinary face. Very similar description to those who described Ted Bundy, who walked up and said, "Hi, my name's Ted," to multiple women. And even with, "Hi, my name is Ted," he was so ordinary, nobody would believe it. This is human. The greatest disguise may not have been some costume, a false beard, a doctor's bag. It was the lack of anything interesting. That possibly has always disturbed me the most. Far more than any mythical version, far more than any version of Jack the Ripper ever could. History suggests something more frightening, something more dangerous. People who are simply not worth remembering. They pass us every day. They don't attract attention. They look exactly like everybody else. The monster's not terrifying because it's extraordinary. It's terrifying because it's forgettable. Perhaps that's the oldest monster of them all. Not the beast hiding beyond civilization, but the lonely soul who eventually stopped believing anyone would ever see them. And perhaps the cruelest irony of the Whitechapel murders is that in the end, history remembered the mask and forgot almost entirely about the invisible man who wore it. And that's why I say, I tell a story.
Damn.
So for anybody who pays attention to the scripts and stuff, that story was 3 times to 4 times longer than the rest of ours.
Jason wrote an essay.
I rewrote this script.
Jason wrote a novel.
I rewrote the script 9 times.
I know.
When I was about 7, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I snuck into the living room. I was wide awake from a nightmare. I had a lot of nightmares back then. Night terrors, they called them. I turned on the TV to calm down because I was a kid in the 80s and that's what we did. A show was on. It was kind of a news report about old things. I didn't know what a documentary was back then. I was 7. The show was kind of glossy and blurry, oversaturated like late 70s and early 80s TV often was. It was about a lady alone in the dark in an old world city I didn't understand, in a time that seemed ancient to me. She was leading a man in a black coat and a tall, funny hat down an alley. Then the music changed. It was low and rumbly. The narrator explained that the man wasn't out looking for fun that night. I didn't know what fun meant, but I knew it wasn't what he wanted. The man wanted to hurt her, to kill her. The program didn't really go into what happened to her or show anything. Didn't even overly describe what he did. But it taught me 4 things that horrified me. She died. She wasn't the only one. No one ever caught him. And worst of all, he was real. And from that point on, so were monsters with human faces. And that's why Jack the Ripper will never be caught.
I like baby chills. Ugh.
That's why I don't think Jack the Ripper will ever be caught. Not because there's some forgotten clue that remains and we're going to get him, but because we've always hunted 2 things. A real man who vanished into history and a legend who escaped into stories. Jack passed into the newspapers, the novels, the films, the museums, the ghost tours, the classrooms, the campfire tales. We inherited him from the last generation. We reshaped him using our hopes and our fears. We sent him back into the darkness wearing new clothes and a new mask. It's what we do. We polish mysteries, we question them, and eventually we write them ourselves. Over time, facts become memories. Memories become legends, and legends become myths. I no longer see that as a failure. Myth, in many ways, is history's afterlife. It preserves questions long after facts have faded, letting each generation revisit a mystery that might otherwise be forgotten. The danger is only when we remember the myth more clearly. Before there was a legend called Jack the Ripper, there were 5 whose lives were forever ended by violence. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. They weren't characters. They were daughters and friends and neighbors and women who laughed, who suffered, who hoped, and they deserved far better than to become footnotes beneath a murderer's name. If this episode has done anything, I hope that we've remembered them and let their presence eclipse a shadow, a forgotten man who hunted them. I know many of you listening may have devoted years to studying these murders. Historians, archivists, detectives, many of you spent countless hours examining statements and tracing timelines, constructing theories. And some of you will deeply disagree with my conclusions, my belief of this simple man. And that's part of the tradition. So let me ask you a final question, not as a criticism, but as a reflection. When you picture Jack the Ripper, what do you see? Is it history, or is it something more personal? A hope for solving a mystery? A conviction about evil? A fascination with psychology? Do you see class? Power? Maybe the hope that every investigator carries to solve what others could not, to be Sherlock Holmes. If you've spent years pursuing Jack, like I have, perhaps you've become part of the story too. Every person who enters Whitechapel leaves a mark, even if it's just in their minds and their dreams. Every theory adds a thread, and every generation adds another. Another mask added to the unknown. Not to deceive, but to understand what refuses to be understood. That's how myths survive because none of us can resist telling one more story. So, because this is the end of our 4-part series, let's sit together and ask one more question. From the beginning of this to now, did your opinion of who Jack might have been change?
Definitely.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Before we delve deep into this, I was thinking Gentleman Jack. Because that's what I always heard.
Right. Oh,
That's
and that's
a
been the
classic
popular. That's been a big one for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
It actually changed me a little bit because I had read I'd read the book about the 5 and I'd listened to the podcast about bad women, which again, folks, excellent podcast. After you're done listening to all of the episodes of The Ark at Heart, I suggest it. So our journey ends much as stories often do. Not with certainty, but with mourning. We leave Whitechapel as we found it. Its secrets kept, its victims still asking to be remembered. Its unseen killer somewhere between history and myth. We've not solved the mystery, nor was that really ever our purpose. Instead, we walk together through a strange country where fact yields to folklore and evidence fades into a story. Tomorrow, Whitechapel will wake again, the real one. Buses will roll where horses once stood. Children will walk the streets where detectives searched with lanterns. And the room where Mary Kelly died, which probably isn't even there anymore, will still be empty and cold. Life continued after 1888, as it always does. Cities heal, even when they remember. Over these 4 episodes, I and my co-hosts have given theories and maybe taken liberties. Maybe I pushed my beliefs a little hard with my views of the painter Walter Sickert, saying the canonical 5 were never sex workers when I know life in Whitechapel was complicated. Much remains unprovable. But still, if you'll allow me to join a little in the tradition of the Ripper stories, I would ask as Puck did. If we shadows have offended, think on this and all is mended. That you have slumbered here while these dark visions did appear, wandering in nightmare with history and imagination, wear each other's masks beneath the London fog. We've shared in a peculiar magic, where shadows become stories and stories become legends. Dreams rarely answer our questions, but they reveal why we keep asking. So if fortune allows us to escape harsh tongues, we make amends. Not with certainty, but with humility. Not with closed minds, but with open hands. Remembering that the greatest mysteries are those that continue teaching us long after we've accepted they may never be solved. So remember the women, question every story, and be careful which masks history asks you to wear.
Okay, love you, bye!
And good night to our dark secret family.